Story 3. There's something happening by the lake in our town. My friend Jonathan has always been a bit of a weird one. You see, we grew up in a small town in northwest Louisiana and never really had much to do, so I oftentimes find myself spending hours after school just hanging out playing video games at his place. Either that or we'd be watching some, at the time, new iDubbbz or Filthy Frank videos on YouTube. During these almost daily visits, our conversations would drift into some odd places. Jonathan had always been the one to tell me about paranormal stories that he claimed happened to him. Things like seeing shadow figures in the corners at night and hearing footsteps up and down the hall of his bedroom. He'd even gone so far as to say he questioned if something supernatural had been following him. While most of our other friends who stayed the night with him would admit seeing some weird things, some of them even saying they didn't want to stay the night again, I, on the other hand, never saw anything out of the ordinary. Quite honestly, I found myself questioning if Jonathan was just yanking my chain with... yanking my chain is such a silly phrase. And with half his stories, at least that was until the summer of 2015. One day, I was over at Jonathan's house just playing video games and talking as usual, when the conversation shifted to the paranormal. He decided to tell me a story that I'd never heard before. Turning off the game we were playing, he took a much more serious tone. Like whatever he was about to tell me carried a lot more weight than his other ghost stories. Jonathan told me that when he was younger, maybe 11 or 12 years old, he lived at this old house on the other side of town by the lake. Now this area, despite being directly on the lake, was still a relatively rural and spread out neighborhood. He, our friend Hunter, and another boy whose name I can't recall were all playing inside the house, while his parents were at work and his sister was at daycare, so as far as they knew, they were alone. At one point, the unnamed boy sees something looking through one of the windows. He tells the others, and all of them look, but whatever it was long gone. Regardless, the boy who saw it is legitimately unnerved and asks the others to stay away from the window. Jonathan and Hunter try to assure him that it was probably just a raccoon or some other animal. Still, the other boy is adamant whatever he saw was no ordinary animal. Now curious, Jonathan and Hunter decide to go outside to see what the third boy was talking about. He begs them not to, but they decide to go out anyway. With the other boy remaining in the house, Jonathan and Hunter began surveying the backyard and didn't see anything. They go to the tree line over by the lake shore, but everything seems normal. At this time, they hear a noise coming from inside the old boathouse. Whatever was in there sounded like it just knocked something over. Jonathan and Hunter decided to make their way to the pier and into the small building. They looked around and didn't see anything at first, but they noticed something moving on the small storage loft above them. When they looked up, they saw a pair of jet black eyes staring back at them. Whatever it was, it had long, thin arms with gray, almost white skin, a large, bulbous head, and not a trace of hair on its body. It didn't move or seem like it wanted to attack, but it just sat there, crouching up and observing them. It was at this point the adrenaline finally kicked in, and the two boys ran screaming from the boathouse. They sprinted up the steps to the back door and slammed it behind them. Frantically, they began making sure every entrance to the home was locked. But as they did so, they realized their friend was nowhere to be seen. Hunter and Jonathan began combing the house until they finally found him. He was curled up in a fetal position, sobbing in Jonathan's closet. Still in a panic from what they just witnessed, Jonathan and Hunter asked the boy what happened. The boy then said something that made the pair's blood run cold. "You were gone for 2 hours." Jonathan and Hunter looked at each other, their faces devoid of color. As far as they knew, they'd only been gone for no more than 5 minutes. Now, in a complete panic, all three boys decided to close the blinds and curtains to every window in the house. They all split up and started going room to room. It didn't take long for the boys to finish. However, Hunter and the unnamed boy regrouped in the living room. Jonathan was nowhere to be found. They realized the last place they'd seen Jonathan go was his little sister's bedroom, but when he didn't emerge, the two boys knew something was wrong. They considered opening the door to the bedroom, but something in their gut told them to stay away from that door, so they did. They sat there, waiting for hours in complete silence, too afraid to speak. They waited on anything to happen, even just a sound to come from that room and let them know that Jonathan was all right. The boys would have to wait for 4 hours to finally hear the thundering sound of panicked footsteps. Jonathan burst into the living room, slamming the door behind him. The boy said he looked completely petrified. However, when they told him how long he'd been gone, His level of fear was somehow able to rise even higher. With his eyes going wide, Jonathan sprinted past his friends and emptied the contents of his stomach into the kitchen trash can. When Jonathan returned, he sat down with the others and waited for his parents to come home. He went on to say, when he went into the bedroom, he made his way over to the window and was about to close the blinds. When he looked down for only a second and he looked up, he was face to face with that thing. He says he was no more than a foot away from it, with just a glass window separating him from those vacant black eyes and inhumane, expressionless face. He said he looked at it for no more than a second before darting back into the living room. At least that's what he remembers. When Jonathan's parents finally came home, they would immediately question why all of the blinds were down. The boys told them what they had seen, and of course they didn't believe him. But the fear on their faces was undeniable, so they knew something must have happened. They went on trying to tell them that it was probably an animal or a neighborhood kid playing a prank on them. This ultimately did very little to relieve the boys of any fear, but eventually they all just accepted that whatever they had experienced was probably best kept between them. Now, I won't deny the fact that I was rather invested in my friend's story, but I had a hard time believing him. Wanting more, I decided to ask a favor of him. I asked him to get in my car and show me where all of this went down. I could see a little apprehension in his expression, but he eventually relented. It was just after sunset when we made our way to the house, and by the time we had gotten to the other side of town, it was truly night. As we continued to this rural neighborhood, Jonathan directed me down the road. Eventually, we came to a turn with a dead-end sign posted. He tells me to drive to the very last house. As we pull up, we find the property is abandoned, with concrete pads where his old mobile home once sat, and the boathouse being the only things left. The grass was rather tall, definitely well on its way to being totally overgrown. It was probably being maintained by the town or a new property owner who only visited seldomly. I pulled into a small concrete pad just off the street, something cars could use to turn around, and we looked out at the property. Even with my brights on, it was still difficult to see much through the grass. I looked over at Jonathan, and he looked very uneasy. He was constantly fidgeting in his seat, with his shifting gaze scanning the property. I thought for a moment and decided to turn my headlights off, given they weren't doing us much good. Our eyes slowly adjusted to the night, and we could see the lake water at the back end of the property, reflecting the full moon on its surface. We noticed something down by the water, but couldn't make out what it was. After a few more seconds, it hit us like a train what we were looking at. There were people. There must have been 20 or so people standing at the lake's edge. There was no mistaking the clear outline of their heads silhouetted by the light shining off the water. All of them just stood there, completely motionless, seeming to stare directly at us. At this time, Jonathan became a complete mess. He started screaming for me to drive, looking like he was on the verge of tears. I obliged as my own heart started pounding and threw the car in reverse, taking off down the road. After making it back to his house, we talked for a while, attempting to calm each other down and come up with rational explanations for what we saw, though it was pretty hard to explain over a dozen people standing there in complete darkness in the middle of nowhere. Eventually, I did end up going back home that night, and Jonathan and I never really talked about it much again. After a few months go by, I ended up hanging out with Hunter at a bonfire. He had moved to a new town a few parishes away, and we didn't run into each other very often. Seeing my opportunity and still wanting to corroborate Jonathan's story, I decided to ask him about the incident at the boathouse. I'll never forget the look on his face when those words left my lips. He went from joking and having a good time to completely pale and deadpan. I almost felt bad, wondering if I'd brought up something he was trying to forget. All he said was, "I'd rather not talk about it." In reality, he didn't need to. That expression told me that whatever happened left a mark on him, and whether or not what Jonathan and I saw was related, we'll never know. Either way, I do know something is going on that property. Okay, so what if the people that they saw were also people trying to have a bonfire and the fire went out?
Yeah.
They're all just standing there being like, where's the lighter?
Yeah, and they see like a pair of headlights come up behind them and they're like, oh, maybe that guy has it. And they start like waving him over and they're like, racing out of there.
Yeah, or it's like a bunch of teenagers on an abandoned property and they're like, is that the cops? Don't move.
Yeah. The description of the thing, the like hairless whatever it was, reminds me of those like short horror movies on TikTok. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Mm-mm.
There's people make a lot of like little short horror movies, but a lot of the like monsters are these tall, like hairless creatures.
Yeah.
Like one of the ones that I sent you the other day that you didn't watch.
No.
Like the creature at the end of it was like, I can't show you. Is a tall, like, naked creature. Yeah. It starts walking. If it's
gross.
like,
Yeah.
so that's what I think of, and that's really scary.
Was that one of the ones where I was like, hey,
Yeah.
so I can't watch that. I don't like this.
Yeah, so it's probably good that you didn't. Probably really good that you didn't.
It's funny.
I did think that was funny when I read that. I was like, yeah, it's smart.
Yeah, because the next one too, I was like, again. Anyway, so
Yeah.
yeah, damn, that is so crazy.
Yeah. Lakes are also super spooky. I would love to at some point, because people talk about it a lot. But Lake Lanier.
Yeah, I was looking for Lake Lanier stories, and I couldn't find one that was like,
Yeah.
here's an experience I had, but there's gotta be, right?
Yeah, no, that's literally like, I don't know, I've never been there, but that's all that people on TikTok, whenever you think about haunted lakes, they talk about Lake Lanier. Mm-hmm. I will say also Crater Lake in Oregon is also supposedly haunted. Mm-hmm. I went to Crater Lake once, and there was just like, it was just ominous. The vibe was really ominous. It's super, super deep. Like the lake is like really, really, really deep. It's supposed to be from like a volcano.
The deepest lake in the U.S.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's
Wild.
spooky. But yeah, lakes are always really creepy. I feel like lakes might be creepier than oceans, just in the fact that you can't really see the bottom of the lake in a lot of places.
Right.
And there are so many bodies in lakes that you don't know
Right.
about. Like the lake that I grew up next to, that's kind of the stigma of the lake is that
Oh my God.
there's just like a lot of bodies in it
Yeah.
because people just drown or people like drop bodies into it. But I remember going for a 4th of July thing when I was in middle school, I think. And that was the first time I ever like glimpsed a body of
Okay.
a person, because
Yeah.
somebody went into the lake and did not come out, and they pulled her out and like walked past everyone. And
Yeah.
I was like, my mom was like, nope.
Don't look.
Yeah.
Don't look.
So that was pretty
Yeah.
spooky. And I do think about that. And then when I was younger, my dad's dad lived on a lake, and we would go out on the lake a lot. And my dad would always tell us like really spooky ghost stories when we would go out, and
Yeah.
it would always freak me out.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, it's just like, just that deep water. And yeah, you're swimming around, you don't have your feet under you. Even if you're like a phenomenal swimmer, I feel like it's not the most natural place for a human to be in. So it's like very vulnerable feeling. Mm-hmm. And then for something to like just come up from under you and just yoink.
Yeah.
And then that's like, even like a fish.
Yeah.
Like some of those like different like catfish and things like that. They're at such an advantage in the water. They fight all you want to. Mm-hmm. If they want you to go down, you're going down.
Yeah. One of my biggest fears when I was younger was bullhead sharks.
Oh, fair.
Yeah, because they're freshwater and saltwater. Mm-hmm. And my dad told me that they could swim up the Rio Grande and come into the lakes. And he was like, they find them in the lakes by us all the time.
I would never get in the water.
Yeah, so every single time I got in the water, I'm like looking around because bull sharks are really aggressive. Mm-hmm. So is there bullhead shark? I think they're just bull sharks. But bull sharks are like really aggressive. So I was like, oh my God, I'm going to die. Like I'm going to swim around in this and I'm going to die.
Yeah.
But nothing ever happened.
Thankfully.
Unless it did, and I'm in a different timeline.
I was saying there's multiple timelines. One of the unfortunate timelines.
Can you tell Jasmine and I have partied too much this weekend?
Yeah.
Everybody. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. We live in La Vida Loca. 365 Party Girls.
If you enjoyed that little story, be sure to watch the full episode here.
And make sure you like, subscribe, and all that jazzy.
Jazzy? I see what you did there. Wait, what was that?